So as I hope you all know, or you're finding out now, at least if you don't, I'm taking sabbatical this summer. And it is such a wonderful privilege, such a blessing to be able to take some time to renew and refresh and figure out what it means to rest. And I have a stack of books about this tall to refill my preaching wells, and a little writing project that's been niggling at the back of my brain. And I'm so grateful to this congregation and to our faith tradition that makes space for this kind of rest and refreshment that really allows for the sustainability of a ministry. And I believe that everyone in the world should get a sabbatical, and I feel very grateful that I'm taking one this summer. So I'll be gone from May 11th to September 8th, and I thought, I'm taking a sabbatical, but we don't just want to hit pause, we want to do something really cool and exciting. And so how about we see if CW happens to be available to join us as Sabbatical Minister during that time, so that it can be a period of mutual growth, and lo and behold,
I'm available.
there he is. So we just wanted to talk with each other in front of you about our hopes and expectations for the sabbatical period. We'll just chat a little bit, and then I think we'll save at least a couple of minutes if there are any questions from the congregation. But we're just going to talk to each other in front of you. That's the plan.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks as well for thinking about me and as a congregation and the board for allowing this old country boy to come over here and be with y'all for a while. I'm getting really prepared. As you can tell, I wore my big coat. This coat used to fit. Then I lost 115 pounds, so I think I'm about halfway cute now. And so it's just cool to be able to do this. I don't know any other Anglo church in this town that has ever asked a person of color to come for their sabbatical of their pastor. And so this is another huge step in which this congregation and you are making, and I'm excited to be part of that. So let me ask you, Pastor, what are your hopes, expectations of me and us as we engage in the sabbatical moment?
Thanks for asking. I may have been able to prepare to answer. But no, so one of the things that I'm really passionate about, and that I think this congregation shares my passion about, is something that Unitarian Universalists have created into a really long word salad acronym.
Okay.
ARAOMC, Anti-Racism, Anti-Oppression, and Multiculturalism. And at its base, seeing the ways that supremacy systems and cultures wound and harm all of us in varying measure and in varying ways, in a way that divides us from one another and therefore from parts of our own humanity. And that's just a thing that I've always been really passionate about and thinking about. And this congregation has really worked hard over a number of years together in thinking about anti-racism and anti-oppression. And in doing that work as a congregation that is a majority made up of people who were socialized as white. That's not at all the entire congregation, but that is kind of the majority culture here because of our history and because of the demographics. And so we've been working really hard on anti-racism, and I've been talking a lot about white supremacy and how we need to, and the work we do to heal our own souls of that. And by say our, I'm just saying that so that I can include myself with some others in, for those of us who were socialized as white, we've been working on that together. And I realized a couple years ago that there's a way in which that needs to be the work of this congregation because of the culture, the dominant overarching culture of the congregation. And there's a way in which making that the only work of the congregation does not serve the people of color who are already here in the congregation. And that work on anti-racism has to be combined with some work on multiculturalism and on creating space that allows for and celebrates a multiplicity of cultural expressions and experiences, so that we are actually serving everyone who's already in the congregation, and so that we are becoming who we want to be as a congregation. And that just saying racism is bad doesn't mean that we are a place that has done the work of taking white culture out of the center of our life together. And so when I was thinking about the work that we've come to, that we want to do, and we have this time, this summer, where we can literally remove an agent of white culture from the center of the church. That's me, right? And that we can move a different cultural experience of leadership into the literal center of the church by taking that central senior pastor role. That this is a chance that the congregation has to experience what it is. You know, I know that they might not, we might not get there just this summer.
Right.
But that there's going to be,
that's right.
that there's going to be a chance to take some time to think about what it is to move that cultural experience out of the center of what it is to be here, at least in the pastoral role.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a start for what I'm hoping for. Is just that we will experience, that the congregation will experience all of what your leadership is, and all of your gifts as a human, and your gifts that your life experience has brought you, and that by doing that they will have a chance, the whole congregation will have a chance to open our experience of culture.
Okay.
What are you hoping for or expecting from the sabbatical period, or if you want to respond to any of that?
I'm hoping that at the end, you won't get a letter talking about get that brother out of here. A couple of things come to mind. Is that I'm not the pastor. And I think sometimes persons who take on these tasks forget that they are not the pastor. But I have an opportunity to share what African American pastoral leadership would be in a congregation that's majority Anglo. It'll be a learning experience for both of us. First of all, most Anglo churches talk about unpacking, moving beyond racism within the context of Anglo culture. Now we get a chance to talk about it through the eyes of African Americanism, what that really means. So here's one of the things that really has attracted me and arrested my attention from the very first time I preached here to the invitation to come. You say you are, or want to be, and working on being a radically welcoming community. What's that mean? Now, if I go to some other places, it means as long as people come here and look like, act like, speak like us, you're welcome. How far we want to push that envelope? And how far are we willing to do that? Now, I'm sure everybody in this congregation, I was thinking about this morning, so I did something crazy. That's why I'm not the pastor. There's a lady outside, she was walking her dog. So I got out of my car and y'all pray for me, don't talk about me. I have a problem. I still like nicotine. Am I the only one up in here? So I was, engaging in some nicotine and listening to my favorite gospel program. And she was walking down the street in front of the church. And so I got out of my car and I walked toward her. She was an Anglo woman with a little big dog. She was nervous because she had a little dog. She didn't have a big dog. And I said, hey, I'm going to be over here running a little workshop this morning. And have you ever come to this church? Have you met the pastor in this church? And she looked at me, and now she took her hand off her knife. And she said, no one's ever asked me. In order to welcome, we have to invite. And not like the evangelicals, not, here's the 4 marks of a saved life. And I always, when they hit me one of those, I say, well, how come y'all put the 4 together? who died and left you in charge, right? But is it possible for a thinking liberal cognitive? That's the other thing that's exciting. I like being around smart people. A lot of times I'm not around smart people. I was going to say dumb people, but that's not nice, is it? I like being around smart people who can think. And one of the things that happens too often with smart people is that we theoretically have it right, but experientially we don't step out on it. And so one of the challenges will be how many of us who work in the context of the African Americans who didn't go to MU but just simply work in the building, who don't have a PhD but are around us every day, how many times have we said to them, you want to go to church with me Sunday? You want to join my group talking about children and our needs and what is your narrative about that? Well, because one of the things we talk about today, and I'm sorry, but y'all got me excited, so this is the way it goes. One of the things, you and I talked about in the office, and what we talked about today, is that there's a real difference for women of color about child rearing than Anglo women who have access to privilege and power. And how do we do that? How do we address that? So, and then I get a chance to work with some gay people, openly gay people. So I'm really excited with that. Because too often LGBT, QI, AA plus folk have to be in the closet in the churches of where they are. But to be here in a congregation that openly receives folk from that community and willing to engage me, because I have a lot to learn. I want to learn. And so this will be a challenge and a way for me to grow and expand as well.
Mutual growth. Sounds good. One of the things that I was thinking about with this is that question about who are you inviting in, and are we making the invitation? That's always an uncomfortable thing for Unitarian Universalists, the anti-evangelists. But also what you said briefly about, are you inviting people in to come and be just like you? And I think that we never intend to do that. But the question of what it actually means to be in a community where we're inviting someone in to come and be not at all like us, like, we don't have experiences of doing that in our our culturally segregated places. And so, what does that even feel like to really go deep in spiritual life with folks who are engaging things in a really different way from the way it is here? And what's that going to bring up for us? I think that's going to be a really interesting question. I think, I chose the poem this morning about being in a place where we're, brave enough to be uncomfortable and to be clumsy and to be forgiving with one another. Because, I could imagine, for me, even just sitting up here talking with an African American man about race in front of a crowd of a lot of white people and a few people of color, you know, am I going to mess it up? Am I going to sound clumsy? Have I already done that? Yes, you know, and so this idea of the trepidation of creating a space that's really open and brave enough to move ourselves out of the center and to be just have the human experience of being amid difference together. And we say that that's what's, like Unitarian Universalists say, difference is holy and not frightening. Mm-hmm. But humans say difference is frightening. And so we actually have to do work as humans and spiritual growth to experience the beauty and the holiness of difference. And that's something I'm really hoping that will persevere through any discomfort or clumsiness to really, really do that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, listening to you reminded me of a bad old joke. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And I think it's going to take one bite at a time with us. And, you know, since we're having open conversation, let's be really open. Our preaching styles are very different.
Can I get an amen?
I think you are a marvelous preacher. And I tell people wherever I go to make sure they come by, visit and hear you. Because I think you have something to say. It needs to be said. You have a keen mind and you have passion. But you're a white lady. and your preaching style is part of, although I seen you free it though, I saw you move.
I'm trying to get
I know that's, but
it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you've been reared in a cultural framework that says, enter into this temple with silence. So, you know, I didn't come here, past preacher, for you to make me feel something. I came here to think about something. But isn't it interesting, that's the same rhetoric of the oppressor. I don't want you folk to feel anything because passion is scary. But then think about today. I saw little people did not ask your permission. Oh, I feel good here. They danced, they sang, they jumped, they ran, they even came up in the pulpit area. Oh, look at me. You know, they had fun. And then I looked at you. And I didn't see one ugly snarl.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
I didn't see a person in this congregation who looked uptight.
Yeah.
Because what children sometimes do that we don't do well is make us see our real selves. My preaching style is very passionate. I hope that people who hear me also believe it is intellectually worthy of reflection. Because in the words of Howard Thurman, I believe it's head and heart. But that's going to be a challenge for us. So I said to myself while I was getting ready to think, I was thinking about what we were going to talk about, and I said to myself, okay, tell the congregation, you know, usually in the black setting, I have to lose about 5 pounds of water, or else people say, oh, he didn't preach today. But if I lose that much, y'all may not come back and hear me anymore. So I promise I only lose 2.5. If y'all beat me halfway. It's like that commercial, isn't it? Mikey, try it. You might like it.
All right.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with a congregation that can be both expressive and reflective. you and I both know, right? Gutierrez says that real theology starts when the sun goes down.
Come on.
The rest is worship and work. So, my expectation is that y'all let me be me, and I'll let you be you.
Amen. Amen.
Would anyone in the congregation like to ask a question?
Now, you know us, you know we love to talk. Please.
So, I don't know the term for it, but there's the idea that white people should work on their racism apart from black people so that we don't re-injure black folks. How do you see that playing out here?
So this is an idea called caucusing, that folks who experience oppressive systems differently need their own space to process that, to process those oppressive systems. So in the case of racial oppression, that white folks need a place where they can heal from the kind of soul wound of white supremacy so that they're not exercising that injury on others, and that people of color need space to process their experience, and that we can, they call it clustering and mingling, that we can mingle more beautifully when we also have space to cluster. And so we have a couple of clustering spaces here. So our white non-toxic men's group, is that what the name is these days? So they are a space for men who are working on patriarchy and white supremacy and the way that it's internalized in themselves. Our soul repair group, or our small-scale reparations working group, is doing some of this reflection. And you know, I'd be happy to spend some time getting another collective space off the ground before the sabbatical begins, if that's desired. It's also some spaces we've had various opportunities for. I think you all have been exercising these muscles, so I don't want you to be scared that you're going to mess it up. I think we've been thinking and talking about this a lot, or you know, I wouldn't have asked to have this experiment together.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to create some more of those spaces, and also like trust yourselves and be clumsy and good-willed, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, one of the things I would like of this congregation is to realize a couple things. The first one is that you can't run me off, you can't hurt my feelings, you can't. Been through too much. Been shot at, had a bomb thrown in my home. Been threatened in various ways, not just me. That lady sitting over there, Miss Dawson, we've been through a lot. I don't expect anybody in here to do that. Can I get a witness? So, and you have to also understand that most of my intellectual vocational life has been in majority Anglo situations. I'm a philosopher. I'm surrounded by Anglo folk who argue all the time. That's what philosophers do. We get together, pick a topic, and argue vehemently. I remember one time I took Maria to a conference, and she sat in there and listened to us argue, and afterwards we all got up and go, hey, where we gonna go have lunch? Right? And my wife speaks in tongues sometimes that are not holy. And she said, I can't believe, I'll clean it up, I can't believe you all want to go together and have lunch after the way you just talked about each other. I said, but that's what we do. I say that simply to say, I am comfortable in a majority Anglo congregation conversation. And one of the ways I think will help us to address those things, I'm not afraid to tell you, honey, you're out of line. I won't be ugly about it. You know, if somebody says, I hope we don't have that ignorant hand waving, I'll have to remind them that there was a time before 1865 when the oppressor used to show up in church in order to make sure the black preacher didn't say something that was liberatory. And they couldn't, and said to the congregation, don't make any noise. The congregation looked at the oppressor and did like this. Come by here, my Lord. Come by here. It wasn't ignorant. They knew what they were doing.
Very, very
So yeah, I mean, again, it's a learning experience. And then you all can help me, you know. Even that after 40 some years of pastoring, what can I do better? That I can represent the faith I have and the people I come from, who are looking for and wanting to be multicultural, not integrated. Not integrated. Don't tell me we want to be integrated, because then we're going to have a conversation over a cup of tea. Because integration always means people of color looking like, acting like, speaking like the dominant culture. No, we want to be multicultural. That whatever we have, we each bring to the table with mutual respect and move toward the fundamentally new. But yeah, so I'm comfortable with that. Right?
You know, this is something that UU congregations sometimes think about with UU clergy of color, of like, oh, we're not ready for them, so, you know, we're not going to hire them, but it's just because we're not, and it's like, but then you're not hiring them, right?
Right.
And it's, you know, when I hear the term white fragility, I often think of like the defensive response, like, you know, the racist being accused of the racism that they're doing and being like, no, I'm not. But it's also, I mean, it's in all of us who are white, who are just afraid of messing up. And by being so afraid of messing up, we don't actually treat the other person like the resilient, extremely dignified, extremely, you know, experienced, extremely resourceful person that they are. And that, you know, fragility can be just as much, you know, wearing kid gloves as it can be getting defensive when we mess up. And so all of it's just a call to like, just be human together. Just be human together, and we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave the mic.
Okay.
I wanted to make a statement to you and your church. In times like these, it is so refreshing and breathtaking to come into a place that's all white and a lot of older people to be, and you're so young. Seriously though, and you guys are so welcoming, and in this season around the world, it's just so refreshing, man. And I'm humbled and honored that you chose my pastor. You know, and in my mind, I thought the crossings was the answer. You know, and it was not. We were looking at a bigger picture, and the bigger picture didn't want us. You know, so I respect you guys, and I thank you. You all who believe that we are somebody, and that's each and every one of you guys, man. Thank you. This means so much. I'm 55, and this means so much to me, to know that every white person is not against me or us, and that they believe in my passion.
thank you.
As you walk to the back to give a mic. So, for those of you who don't know, I had taught 3 courses at the Crossing. They looked like they were going to call me to preach, hire me on staff, whatever. And then what happened was they started listening to what I was saying. And they read my little column, about all Christians are not against transgenderism. And so the next thing I knew, I thought I was going to lunch and they were going to offer me a job. And I went to lunch and they said, we don't need you to come back. And I was like, oh. And then the next thing is I get a call from Reverend Housh Gordon.
Yeah.
So you might as well get used to me. Here it goes. The Lord moves in mysterious ways. And a woman, yeah, that's right. Sorry.
It's all right. You're a follower of the Nazarene.
Yes.
Many of us here are not.
Yes.
My own personal path is one of paganism
Okay.
and a belief in multiple deity.
Yeah.
How is that going to work out while you're here?
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's see. First of all, because I come from, that Nazarene is Jewish. And so out of Judaism, there was this idea that there was a God that was above all other gods. In fact, in the original translation of Psalm 8, it's not a little higher than angels, but of the gods. And so there's always been a recognition that there's more than one God. I have the same. I think there's more than one God too. H. Richard Niebuhr, in a little book called Monotheism in the West, says that America, particularly, suffers not because it doesn't believe in God, but because it believes in too many. And here's the problem, an intellectual problem in which I'm going to engage in. I do this with my Wicca friends too. And that is, if every God demands absolute allegiance, how do you worship more than one? Now that's a learning experience, right? Because that's also with my Hindu friends too, right? But theology for me, by definition, I define theology as to speak about God. So whether it's polytheistic or monotheistic in nature, but it could also be agnostic, and so I also know that Unitarian Universalists have agnostics, generally in the congregation. And so what is the God talk we can have about, from an agnostic perspective? To live in the world as if there is no God, or not know if there's God? Or what about living in a way to talk about God atheistically? And so I define that as to talk about God as that God does not exist, and what are the necessary and sufficient conditions to claim that God doesn't exist. I think there's a couple, ladies and gentlemen. Evil. If God is in the traditional, right, omni brothers plus two, right, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, caring, and good, if those are the characteristics of God, why is there evil in the world? And I think those arguments are powerful arguments in which we need to discuss, even as a Nazarene follower. I think people only grow if they continue to talk. My job is not going to be to convince you to be a Nazarene follower. My job is to provide you an opportunity of discourse where we can investigate and learn from one another.
Amen. So often I think our we say Unitarian Universalism is about theological diversity, and it is. And yet, it's not all that frequent that our congregations take a really deep chance to put those diverse theological viewpoints in real conversation with one another. I think we get at it in our chalice circle small groups. and probably in our friendships and relationships with one another. Hopefully throughout the worship year there's some dialogue, but I'm also usually trying to create a really large container for all of you to place yourselves in. And so one of the things we're hoping to do this summer, both with the dialogue of Pastor Dawson and with our lay-led worship, is create an entire summer worship series that's exploring our theological diversity. And so as well as having Pastor Dawson preaching every other Sunday, as I usually do during the summer, all of the lay-led worship will be offered from folks who want to offer from their particular different theological perspective. So, somebody who uses Buddhism as the meaning-making system that's most profound in their life to offer a service. Have some of our atheist or humanist folks get together and offer a service. Various other traditions. We would love to hear from Kaleidoscope, as we always do, and to intentionally engage that multiplicity among us this summer. So I want to keep talking, and I know there was another question, but I also am realizing that our Sunday school teachers have now had 20 minutes more than they expect with our children, and they're probably going to kill me if we don't wrap it on up. So I'm just going to say that this conversation will continue as needed, and we're both happy to answer questions by email or get in touch, and we're happy to answer further questions. But thank you, Pastor, for being with us today.
Bless you.